not even for sure how to explain any of this here, so we're gonna just let AJ and James and their worms have at it. So thank you, you guys, for coming and sharing with us. So you just go ahead and go.
All right, first of all, I'm recording this, so every now and then I'm gonna have to just keep hitting play because I'm on YouTube. So if you're interested, my channel is AJ's Green Topics, and I have a lot of videos on worms. And I just reached 2,400 subscribers, so my channel is slowly growing. And what I do, I educate people, have a great community, and give back to the community. So I love to invest in the people and then give back to the community. But my goal is to get the knowledge and wisdom out about worms so everyone can become a worm farmer. So thanks to the Y, thanks to the Y for the opportunity. Thank you for taking your time out to be here. And thank you, James, for helping me. So we'll start off with, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Okay. So is anyone in here afraid of worms? Because a lot of people are afraid of worms. And, there's some big ones. There's like Alabama jumpers, they're called. And they're big snakes, big worms. But I'm gonna throw this out there right now. You don't have to worry about worms getting out of the base, out of your den, crawling upstairs and getting into your bed. So don't worry about that. So if you're in your basement, you'll be just fine. Okay.
So my name's James Holland. I've been keeping a worm bed for off and on for 10 years, and maybe having taken a season off or two. I moved from Houston one time to where I couldn't bring my worms with me, so I had to donate them. But I've been doing it for about 10 years, and it's been a lot of fun. So how long have you been doing it?
Been doing it for about 4 years. When I first got on YouTube, I said I'm gonna take a chance. This whole upload a video with worms, and I have 42,000 worms, which is 2 pounds of worms, and upload a video. I was kind of embarrassed because worms, you're kind of a dirty person, but now everyone knows that I have worms, so even Larry. So, but yeah, I enjoy raising worms. My family was kind of, I don't want them in the house. I made a mistake and they died, and I snuck them in. but now my boys tell my friends I make videos and I have worms, so yeah, they know the benefits of worms now.
I'm actually the opposite. My worms are inside. The temperature is easier to control. They're in my basement. As long as they have a good habitat, they're not going to leave. And my wife has just gotten used to it. So it was, the first month or so it was a little dicey, but they're now part of the family.
So you can't sneak them in, fellas. But so we're going to talk about worms. So why should you start a worm farm? And the benefits for what I have experienced over the years is there's so much waste that goes to landfill, and it releases methane gases, so we're messing up our environment. That's one thing that I've noticed. And number two, it reduces your food waste. Your trash will be a lot less. So if you want to eliminate the use of the blue bags a lot more, to save your money, if you have worms, it's going to make you use less bags over the years. So because they eat there's a lot of things that they will eat that you will no longer have to throw into your trash cans. So so just something to think about. And I'll get back with you on that one. But thank you for that question. And you're able to make your own fertilizer. Organic, you know what goes in and what goes out. So you can go to a big lot store, pay $20. You make an investment with your worms, you'll make 100-fold with your worms. So they're great workers. They don't go on strike. They work 24/7, and they don't ask for money. Just feed them. So.
Yeah, the the gardening is why I initially got into it. The gardening led to composting, and the composting led to the vermicompost, which is the worm composting. And it is one of the best fertilizers you can actually get out there. There's no smell to it. It just is, if you picked it up, it would smell just like fresh soil. And applying that to my garden without having to purchase, like, you know, like there's some things like the chicken manure, it's hot, so you have to actually have it cook on the side before you can apply it to your garden. Pig fertilizer, there's a smell to it. So you don't have any of these problems with the worm castings, and whatever you feed them ends up in the soil. So we'll get into what they eat later, and how you can, you know, buff up your compost.
So let's talk about the type of composting worms. There's a lot of worms out there, but the 4 common composting worms are red wigglers, blue worms, European night crawlers, and African night crawlers. And I kind of picture like worms as dogs. You know, there's like so many breeds of dogs. You have your Yorkies and you have a German Shepherd, okay? There's so many types. So Yorkies and German Shepherds, they both have teeth, they both can run, they both can bite. Now, can you picture a Yorkie on a canine unit? Go get him, tiger! You know what I mean? Because a Yorkie's not meant for the canine unit. A Yorkie's not meant for pulling a bobsled. You know, there's certain dogs for everything. And these 4 types of worms, like I said, the red wigglers, blue worms, and Europeans and African night crawlers are the 4 common types of composting worms.
So they're shallow divers, so they stay fairly close to the surface. A lot of times if you're moving a rock or messing around in your garden where maybe you move some leaves and the bottom layer is wet, those are most likely these type of worms. Where your earthworms are deep divers. They're not good for composting because they want to be deep down in the soil, and if you were to put earthworms in these bins, they would actually die because they're not meant for this type of, they would get stressed out. They're not meant for this type of thing.
Yeah, earthworms like to go at least, I heard about 6 feet deep into the ground. They irrigate the soil. So if you ever see earthworms in your gardens when you're chilling, that's a sign of a healthy garden. So worms are always good for that concept.
What I've always heard was 1,000 worms are in about a pound of worms. Instead of having to sit there and count them all, that's kind of the go by for how many worms you actually have. There's 2 things that they eat, browns and greens. Browns are carbons and greens are nitrogen. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Did you want to talk about the cocoons?
Also, to get a worm bin started, it takes 2 worms. So they mate, they're hermaphrodites, both male and female, so all worms can mate with each other once they're adults. And you can tell an adult worm, it's called a clatidium. It's like a band around like this, an earthworm. That means they're adult worms and they're able to make babies. And they make cocoons. If I open this up, maybe I can find one, but cocoons are real small, but European nightcrawler cocoons are larger. But in a cocoon, there's a chance for each one to have from 1 to 4 plus babies. So you never know what you're gonna get. But so there's always benefits. Like, so if you have like the average standard, 1,000 worms, 1,000 pounds, imagine what's gonna happen in that worm bin, you're gonna have babies. So we'll talk about the places you can get worms from. I'm an affiliate. I don't have the opportunity to sell my worms. I've sold a few, but I touch base with people. I've purchased worms from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. He's in Pennsylvania, good company. Northeast Worms, he's in New York, and a new affiliate I'm with is Mimi's Worm Farm. She's in Georgia. But the thing about Uncle Jim's Worms is they've had a complaint that you'll get like red wigglers and blue worms mixed in. And blue worms are they're a little bit different. If the atmosphere changes, like it's gonna rain, they wanna kind of come up more because they're more, wanna get out. Red wigglers are more laid back. So if you ever have a problem with your worms trying to do that, it's because they're blue worms, but once you've been started, you'll be just fine. But now people are trying to just have pure red wigglers. So if you, in the future, get pure red wigglers, you're going to have to pay more money because people are actually taking the time to do that with the red wigglers. But blue worms and red wigglers, I've never had a problem before they tried to get out, you know, but I learned more and I know how that they're different worms, so now I don't have a problem.
But they can be mixed.
Yep, and I think a mixed worm bin is better. If you purchase worms, I would say with you to buy the mixture of red wigglers, blue worms, and Euros, because you have a mixture and they're able to do the same thing, but some will be higher or lower, you know, and your castings will be different. So you'll have a variety of castings. And this bin right here has a mixture of red wigglers, blues, and Euros. I like this the best, so this is I call this the inclusion and diversity worm bin. There's all types of worms in there.
So this is another. There's all different kinds of bins out there. You can make your own bin out of wood. I've seen people use composting structures, tumblers to keep worms. I have one of these styles at home. They're fairly cheap and affordable, and I've had more success than this one's runs around 80 to.
It could be more, yeah. Prices keep going up with everything. They're about, I'd say about 80 to 100 plus.
So with a system like this, it comes with different trays. So it comes with 4 trays. So you start with one tray and you put the lid on it, and then you build up. So naturally the worms will go up through the system because everything's eaten and finished down at the bottom, and they'll move up to the fresh food. So this advertises that you don't have to sort worms because the process, that's in my case, there's worms in every layer. So it also tends to dry out more. That's why I've liked these better. But this is an option if you don't want to do arts and crafts.
Yes, and with my bin, it used to be, okay, you'd use 2 totes. You'd have this one here, you'd drill the air holes in the top so they can have a lot of air. And then you drill a couple holes on the bottom for drainage if it's too much liquid. And you'd have another bin that's new on the bottom so it catches the liquid. But I no longer do that. I go one method, just one bin, no holes on the bottom, because you don't want the liquid to leak out of your bin, because that's a sign of you're just adding too much moisture. And they talk about worm tea, but that's another advanced thing we can talk about another time. But with this one here, if you have this one started and you add watermelon, you don't have to worry about it leaking. Just add a lot more cardboard or paper to absorb the moisture, and you'll be just fine. So I no longer use 2 totes. And that way, with your other tote, once you get more worms, you're able to just use that one and start another worm bin if you're interested. So let's go with one. I learned a lot. It took me 6 years to get that. But in a perfect world, you should not have a lot of liquid in your worm bins. It's experience, and the more I've done, I've had.
There's 2 layers in there?
There's
No,
only
it's just one now. There was 2, but I no longer do that. So
it really matters on the angle and the type of person you are.
mhm.
AJ is hands-on and he's got YouTube videos, he's always checking them, he's their best friend. I, on the other hand, have that two-layer system because I'm more hands-off. I dump food in there and I let them handle it, and I don't mess with them sometimes at weeks at a time. You could go on vacation and leave them be as long as they're fed. So with that issue, you have to control moisture though, and that's why I still use that system, because all the extra liquid goes to the bottom and it still keeps the top dry. So because I am less hands-on, I need that system. Otherwise, I would end up with a smelly mess.
So as you can see, choose what works best for you. We have different techniques, but we're both successful.
Does that liquid smell?
So what ends up happening is the liquid stays with the compost and the vegetables, and it starts to almost rot. And so you want that airflow and drainage, just like plants would, and you know how they get root rot. It's the same thing. Worms need to breathe. They breathe oxygen just like we do. So if your bin is filled with too much moisture, well then they can't breathe because it's just like they're drowning. So your population will suffer also from that. Some of the worm needs, their best temperature is 60 to 77 degrees. They can range in a lot wider range, but that's their favorite temperature. Moisture control, you want, what would you say, squeezed out sponge?
Yeah, that's what they say, yeah.
Then acidity, you want pH 5 to pH 9. So anything too acidic is almost like you're putting vinegar on the worms. So you do want to stay close to that neutral.
So you test it?
People have used like testers, pH, but I have never done that.
Either have I.
So if I can learn on my own and not have to waste money on extra stuff, I don't do it. So I never use a thermometer, I've never did that, so you don't have to.
The easiest way to tell that you have a problem is your worms aren't staying in your bin.
Yeah, no exodus they call it. So your worms will try to escape your bin.
If you have a happy bin,
Yeah.
they will never leave. And like, what kind of life is that? You know, you're pampered every day. You know. So,
yeah, exactly. Feeding off of you real quick. African night crawlers, they're not for this environment. They're a hard worm to take care of because they need 70 plus of temperature. So the two types to start with for Iowa, the Midwest, Euros and red wigglers, because they're more, can tolerate the climates better than Africans.
How big are the night crawlers? Say if there's a fisherman.
Yeah.
oh, so that's one of the things.
Right.
So when it comes to your end goal, are you wanting them for fishing? Or are you wanting them for just the castings? So if you want them for fishing, you want a high turnover. So you're wanting to feed them a lot and change their bin and take that compost out so they keep breeding. Adding oats will, like oatmeal, if you grind up oatmeal, your worm will actually get buffed up. It's like a steroid for them. So because they're actually fairly, we'll see them later, they're actually pretty hard to put on a big hook if they're not buffed up.
Yep.
So you feed them the oats so they get thicker for fishing purposes. But if you want castings, you want them to cycle through that 3-4 times. So essentially they're eating their own feces over and over again, and it breaks it down to a really black, fine material. The side effect to that is you have less population because they're not as healthy and they're not reproducing as much. Also, size of container does matter on your reproducing. They will continue to grow as long as the size permits it. They will stop growing as soon as they're cramped.
How long do you harvest the castings to put on your?
AJ, we will get into that
Yeah,
later.
well,
AJ,
we got
we'll
you.
get into that.
Yeah.
I'm done with the bins.
The special formula for the supersized worms, it's called, they call it worm chow. That's how, if you purchase worms, which you, if you do, they'll be nice and thick. Because they feed them a special, the oatmeal, and they put a couple other things in there. But after you get them home and if you don't keep feeding them the oatmeal and stuff, they'll lose their size. But if you wanna keep them for fishing, cooked oatmeal, I think, as long as there's no salt on it. Yeah, no salt, but oatmeal heats up. It's kind of like rice, but we'll tell you exactly how to do that when you put your food scraps into your bin. Yeah, I understand. Okay. And also, you have a spigot on the bottom of your bin, correct?
Yes. So you can either close the valve or you can open it. So you can close and let it collect and then come at your convenience to empty it. Or in my case, when I was using this, I would just leave that sucker open, just have a bucket to catch the moisture.
Do you use that moisture for putting on your garden or anything?
You can, but it's not. No, it's more or less mainly water, but then it's got other stuff in it. It's not going to harm your plant, but it's not the worm tea, which AJ was talking about. That's a different process, which a lot of people swear by.
Exactly. Thank you, James. But before in my bin, when I had the two totes, I would get the liquid in there. And also, when there was holes on the bottom, worms would get through. Even if it's small, worms can kind of fit through there. And you'd find worms on the bottom. So if you ever had like the two system, like have cardboard or something down there so they have something to eat. But we're no longer going that way. We're just going in one tote. You know, my job is to keep it simple, you know, and just tell you the easiest way to do things to save money. So let's talk about the bedding. You know, what is worm bedding?
So some of the bedding that I use is just whatever waste I have around. I have a young one, so she comes home with lots of paper. I bring stuff from the office. So I will actually shred regular paper, or if I have news, I've involved all my friends and family, and I don't have the newspaper, but I have others that do, so they collect them for me, and I will just tear them. I don't have to shred that, I just tear them in a 1/2 inch to 1 inch strips, moisten it down, and I'll use that as bedding. I also use what's called coconut core, which is the coconut fiber husk, and they compress it down to bricks, and then once you add moisture to it, like one little brick, it'll just balloon up to it's great for gardening too.
It's a great
It's one of my favorite beddings because it also holds moisture very well too. So I've used that in the past, but the easiest one is probably newspaper. Some people use wood chips, animal manures, because animal manure, like horse manure, cow manure, if you ever actually go and look in a pie, that's where they live. They love that. So if that's something that you can, if you're okay with adding or you have access to, that's an option.
Yep, just feed off you real quick. But they recommend and encourage you don't use like cows that have like chemicals in it, like dewormer, stuff like that. So just FYI for you. So.
Leaf mold, which is in the springtime when you have piles of leaves maybe left over the under, that bottom layer of leaf that's kind of wet. That's really good. It can also bring in pests though, so be aware of that.
What type of pest? mites.
Mites,
The big ones, snails.
slugs,
Yeah.
because, we'll get into the different pests that you can get later on. Peat moss is an option, but I don't recommend using peat moss. Peat moss is not a renewable resource, and when there's so many options to use for worm bedding, I would highly suggest not using that.
That ink on the papers doesn't make anything.
Yeah.
All it's going to do is dirty your hands when you tear it. I stay away from colored ink though, so they're anything that's shiny. So when you open up, when you get that big newspaper and you have all those advertisements in the middle, I stay away from those because shiny color they have issues with. I like to add a scoopful of soil in my bedding because you'll introduce to your ecosystem minerals, microorganisms that are beneficial to those worms. Grit. Worms don't have stomachs, so they have gizzards, so they have to eat grit to grind their food. So that soil is the initial form of grit. Later on, I used eggshells, and some other things for grit. One of my favorite things to do is, have you ever heard of zeolite? So I think it's volcanic. Don't quote me on that, but it's little rock granules. So in those rock granules, it balances your pH. It absorbs ammonia and odors if you did something bad, because there shouldn't be any smell, but it takes care of bad ones if it does. It adds grit, and it actually adds air for not only the worms, but for the plants if you're then moving the compost to the garden. Because you don't want like clay type soil, you want soil that breathes when you garden. And these little rocks will benefit both the worms, adding air to the bed, and then air to the plants later on. You know,
Cereal boxes. I don't use cereal boxes, but there's been other worm farmers that I connect with on YouTube that have used cereal boxes, but I don't put those in my den, but people have used them. But I just use strictly made cardboard and newspaper, not the glossy section. But the thing I like to see is, that's why I don't use peat moss, because there's some things that could be involved with that, but I like to see the before and after. I like to see that the worms made the worm castings. Worm castings is the professional name, but it's really worm poop. So, but we call it black gold, which is all worm farmers want. But yeah, it's awesome. And the thing why you want to add bedding, make it moist, add your sand, your dirt or whatever, it's because you want to give the worms a habitat, a natural environment. So that's why it's got to be moist and stuff. Like James says, they breathe through their skin, and they have a gizzard, so that's why they need grit. And I've seen other people that are doing experiments now, the ones that have more experience, that they're starting to like remove grit from worm bands to see if they can survive. But, and another quick plug, worms have 5 hearts, so.
I was done with bedding. You want to move on to the?
So what do they eat?
What do they eat? So, I like to tell people, just like us, where you like to have a fillet, like your fillet is like your top meal, right? Well, worms have that same type of likes and dislikes. So they eat browns and greens, like we talked about earlier. Browns are carbons. So anything like paper, cardboard, leaves, you know, those little carriers that your sodas come in that you get from the drive-through, they love that. So those are carbons. Anything that is pretty much has died or was once alive and is now dead. Where you have greens are your leftover, vegetable scraps, your peels, like if you're peeling carrots, potatoes, your oatmeals and cereals work really well. Who drinks tea and coffee on a daily basis? Well, those coffee grounds, that's filet to them. They love that, and it's also an added nitrogen to your soil come planting in the gardening season. Eggshells. Eggshells are great for grit, but it's also calcium. How many people grow tomatoes? Tomatoes, that you'll get that blossom rot if you don't have that extra calcium. And so eggshells are great. Anything else?
Going back to how you reduce your garbage, they'll eat those napkins, you know. Throw your napkins in there. Throw all your food scrap, like it says, your banana peels, your
Banana peels.
there's other things. On advanced level, there's people that have put meat inside of a worm bin, but they have like bigger systems, but they can eat meat. They'll eat mac and cheese. They'll eat broccoli. They'll eat pasta. But I don't put any carbs in my worm bins because they're not big. But there are people that, because the female I just looked at, she put a pork chop in there, and the worms ate the pork chop within 5 days. So, but starting off basic, let's go with the basic food scraps, like, you know, your everyday things. Like I said, start using your napkins. Throw them in there, you know. If you see like someone littering at a football game and they got like a piece of cardboard, then you can pick that up and give it to your worms, because
How about
no styrofoam, no styrofoam or plastic,
So,
any of that.
so things not to feed them is anything that's non-biodegradable. So your plastics, styrofoams, like you put a banana peel in, you'll find tons of those stickers, and they'll eat everything around it, and you'll just have the sticker left.
Envelope, the little styrofoam thing on an envelope, those will all be laying in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you put a pork chop in there, you fish the bone out afterwards?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm going to highly suggest, if you're growing outdoors, it may not be an issue, but just know that when you deal with meats, meats and oils, you're gonna deal with odor and what I consider unwanted pests. If I put if I go fishing and I put fish in my compost, the scraps, well, I live right on the back of a field. Well, I might have a skunk or a raccoon or some critter trying to get that rotting flesh. So there is an odor to it, so if you're inside, stay away from it. And if it's outdoor, just be aware you could have unwanted pests. Pet feces is a no-go.
But the worms won't eat the bone.
No, they won't. But this person I know, she had a larger system. It's called an urban worm bag. That's like probably from down about here. So she could bury it deep, you know, and for her, she had no problem. But for me, I won't do it because this bin is not big enough, so.
You keep doing that, the bones build up.
She found the bone. She knew where it was. She put like a little tab, like you mark a potato.
Take it out.
Yeah, and found the bone and threw it away, so.
But I would highly recommend, do not use meats,
But
proteins.
if you burn the bones at a fire, wood
It's-
fire, you can pound them and break them.
Yeah, you can break them down and make bone meal, I guess.
Bone meal.
But yeah, but just basic for us today.
You bring up a great point too. Adding ash to a bin is also good, just like it would be if you had an outdoor compost. So if you had a burn pile and you had extra ash laying around, that's beneficial.
Human poop either, because people do that. It's like, don't do that. I'm like, so those are the videos.
I didn't even write that down
Yeah,
because
those
I
are-
didn't think anybody would do that.
Those are the videos I pass up. Like,
People, dogs and cats.
yeah, it's like,
Do
I
not,
know.
no pet fits. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's processed.
Yeah.
Their digestive works
Yeah.
different than your other livestock.
Yeah.
And there's also vegetables that I found out that are almost worse odors than rotting meat. broccoli. If you ever had broccoli that was decomposing, that smell is absolutely horrible. So I have an anti-broccoli. My wife will pick out all the broccoli from the scraps before she gives them to me because it is the worst.
Exactly, good choice.
So what do you do, you dry that first?
Dry the broccoli.
What if you dry it out so it wouldn't?
Oh, you,
Once you're moist.
yeah, that's
once,
even more.
once you add it into your compost, that moisture will just go right back into that broccoli. So, I'm afraid there's no keeping that moisture away from it.
Yeah, also, this said you're not supposed to feed them citrus, like orange pills, you know, and stuff like that. You can do it now, people are proving the myths, but just a little bit, moderation. Onions, a little bit. You know, you don't wanna overfeed your worms. Worms eat half their body weight a day. So the average, I would say, I always tell my viewers, if you have a family of 4, get 2,000 worms. That's equivalent to 2 pounds of worms. So half a pound of, you know, food a day. If you have 5 pounds of food, you figure the math and it should be gone within a certain time frame that week. There's other ways that you feed them, and we can talk about the 4 ways that I know how to feed my worms. Is you could feed, if you could get a banana peel, you could feed it to them whole, like just get it out of you eat it and throw it in your bin. Or you can cut it up and they'll eat that faster, quicker. Then there's also a method where they call them smoothies, worm smoothies. So you put everything in a blender and blend it. But if you do it that way, you wanna just put it on one side of the bin because it gets hot. You know, food breaks down and heats up. But the best way, if you're gonna do it, is to freeze all your foods and thaw them. It breaks down quicker and it helps to eliminate certain pests in your worm bins. And worm bins, if it's running successful, it's aerobic. It means it's good to go. There should be no smell. But like aerobic, but anaerobic is the reason your garbage stinks. I know you guys never smelled stinky garbage before, but it stinks because there's no air, you know, and that's why our garbage stinks. My goal is hopefully my family will come on board because they throw things away still. I'm like, so once they're gone, I'll take it, you know, because I'm so used to recycling now. But my family's doing a good job. We're getting on board. We're becoming better recyclers when it comes to our food scraps. But I even asked friends. I'm like, hey, what are you gonna do with your foods leftovers? We're gonna get rid of them. I'm like, give them to me. I'll compost them, you know. But a lot of people don't really know the concept until you get involved. But everything's going up, so it's a great way to go.
We talked about what you put in the bin is what you get out. So if you're a gardener, you know they like potassium. Plants like, you know, phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon. So all those things that you put in will be in your soil come gardening time. So remember that. The way my family works with bananas, we buy probably too many bananas and it'll hang there and then it'll turn dark brown. I'm like, oh, banana bread. 3 days, 4 days later, well, it's now worm food. So bananas are a huge part of my family and my composting bin.
So yeah, there's a lot of things you put in there, but starting out basic, you know, just keep the basic like food scraps, like your bananas, your napkins or whatever. Don't do meats and stuff until you get more advanced, because I want your bins to be successful, you know. The thing, how I lost my first batch of worms, I paid like $40 back then, and they're outside and they froze to death. But worms, I noticed if they're gonna freeze, they lay eggs because they try to keep their population going. They're amazing creatures. So, and a lot of people I talk to now, we're all like, oh, we gotta try to save every worm, because our minds is different, because you know the benefits of worms. But when you feed them, don't feed them a lot, you know what I mean? If you have 2 pounds of worms in there, don't give them 20 pounds of food. Always give them less, you know what I mean? And then when the food is gone, then keep adding more. You know, if you have the chance, keep food in your freezer and thaw it out.
It's a 2-to-1 ratio.
Go
I
ahead.
think you might have mentioned.
Go ahead.
So it's for every pound of worm, it's a pound of garbage per day. So 2 pounds of worms, 1 pound of garbage. So you can work it out that way. Or if you're the lazy way, you just big old smorgasbord. They'll eat it, they'll break it down, and then I'll let it pile up in the freezer. Then out comes another feeding. So
Good job. Let's talk about when they multiply, okay? How often do they multiply? If I have two pounds of worms, 2,000 worms, give or take, and I have a bin this size, how often should they multiply in a perfect condition? You know, they multiply every 3 months. So in a perfect world, if you have 2,000 worms, 3 months, you should have 4,000, then 8,000, and they keep growing. But can you get like 1 million worms in a bin this size, James?
like we mentioned before, once this apartment complex fills up, there's no vacancy, they'll stop laying eggs. Worms will start dying off. You'll never see pretty much a dead worm in your composting bin, because as soon as they die, the worms eat them. So,
So it get to a point where the bin would hold just so many worms then, right?
Yep.
I at one point, the most I've gone up to is 3 bins, because as soon as I'm at a limit and you can feel the weight,
They get heavy. Castings get heavy.
I'll cut that in half, put it in a new bin. And I've had 3 bins going, and I sold 1 bin that was full of compost and worms for $100. They just bought everything. So if you wanted to, like, there's a gentleman outside Britt that he actually has a worm business where he does nothing but raises, well, he's a farmer, but he raises worms on the side and sells both the compost and the worms for fish. So you can sell it to your neighbors, or like I do, because sometimes I don't get a garden, I give the compost to my neighbors if I don't have a garden that year. So you'll make really good friends.
AJ, do you have a garden?
Yeah, I just started. I'm getting really invested in the gardening right now. The reason I do, because now I focus on, I'm more on becoming a homesteader, composting, grow my own garden. A lot of people I talk to now, they encourage me. I don't have chickens and stuff, but a lot of friends I know have chickens, and they're not relying on the world. They're trying to make their own. You know, you live on a farm, so you know you can can stuff. So I'm starting to learn how to can. I'm trying to learn how to do that. But I'm starting a garden now. I'm doing kale and a lot of vegetables, and if I have an abundance, I'm going to give to my neighbors. So I want to get involved with your community garden. So I'll probably give you guys seeds to help you guys with your community garden. But yeah, gardening and this go hand in hand. Worm videos connect with gardeners, gardeners connect with worms, and worms and gardeners connect with homesteaders. So it's like a circle of life. So we're all learning from each other. And with James and I, do your own research. If we tell you something, find out for yourself to verify that it's true. You know, don't believe everything we're saying, but we have knowledge and we know what we're talking about.
Most of it's from initially learning from YouTube videos or reading articles, or for example, this book, it's one of the best books I could recommend. And with that information and trial and error, it's easy. It really is.
I'm going to show you when we end what castings look like, but why you should harvest your castings. It's the worm poop. You should say to do it every 3 to 6 months. So that way, when your castings are in there, your worms will keep eating, but after a while, they'll be eating their own poop, and you don't want to do that. You want to give them a healthy environment. So take your castings out, take out half of it, and we call it sifting. what I do, there's so many different gadgets, but I have one of these, and you let it dry off, you cast it, and then you sift it, and it'll come out really fine like this. And this is what you put on your garden. If anyone would like to see, it does not stink. So these are worm castings that I sifted, and I have them in a kitty litter bucket right now.
When you dip those castings out, who do you know you're not getting worms also?
There's ways you can separate your worms. There's the sort by hand. You put light. I'm sorry. Yeah, these are the castings, but there's no smell. It's earthy. But I get it. But you can sort them. You can put them on a tarp or something, let the sun, and then you just gradually sort them, and all the worms should go to the bottom.
Okay.
There's the migration method where you start to feed one side the food, then it'll come on that side with like say you have the fresh stuff, they'll come over here. And if there are stragglers, just as life is, you have the ones that are, and those, if I catch stragglers, once I sift them, they go in this bin. Because they had the chance and made a bad choice. So they go in that mixed worm bin. So that's what I use this one for now. And right now I have 4 bins running active.
Your worm will live if you're taking your compost to the garden. There's nothing wrong with having your worms in a house plant or out in the garden. So you don't have to worry about that. Castings, if you don't get all the castings, the cocoons, they will hatch in possibly your final product, but it will just be part of wherever you're growing. I used to, during the winter time, I grow romaine lettuce indoor in a 2x2 planter, and I use that as a secondary worm composting. I just plant in the corners and I just rotate, and so those worms travel back and forth, fertilizing my romaine lettuce, and I just continually pull from them. So.
And your method here, you can have up to 4 trays, it depends. But your worms, you start off with bedding, and then you feed the next layer. Is that how yours works?
And it's the same way as what you're talking about, is you feed on one end, they move. Well, here you're just, instead of feeding on one end, you're just feeding up. And
So the worms travel up.
they travel to the
Take
food.
off as the cast.
Yeah, so you won't really have to.
What I do is I stopped using this because it dries it out. It's more high maintenance, and that's not the kind of worm farmer I am. And I use this now to sort because it actually has a natural sifting what they travel through. So I'll put the worm compost up on top. I'll shine a light on it. They absolutely hate light. They will move down. When they get stressed out, they will ball up together. So they will all just group up for you into a big old ball, and you can just grab them, move them to your bin. So when you actually get the worms, they'll be in a giant ball, and you'll place them down, and right away they won't want to move away because they're stressed out from being mailed. Maybe not the best way to.
They're in
send
peat
them,
moss. They deliver them in dry peat moss. That's how I get my worms. They're shipped in dry peat moss, but they're alive. But they're stressed, and you put them in your bin.
and then eventually they will spread out. But it's not as hard as we're making it sound. It's probably my least favorite thing to do out of being a worm farmer.
Yeah, the castings.
But it's not too bad. You just shine a light on them, come back an hour later, and they'll be gone.
Recommend, encourage, don't get a clear bin. People use them, but the darker the better, because stress is the main thing. And then also, if your worms arrive, do the mill, add water to them in your worm bin to get them moist, and then they'll bury down once you put light on them. A lot of people leave the lid off 24 hours of light on to help them stay in there. But I have a cat and I don't want to take any chances. So just make sure you have a lot of air holes in your worm bin. And every now and then when you first get them, you're gonna want to look at them all the time. It's okay to look at them once or twice and then wait to, already have your bin pre-prepped. That's how I do it. Like if you're gonna order worms within the next week, 3 days before, already get it started, have your bedding and all that stuff in there, and your sand and your egg grit. Kind of like our houses, we get them painted before we move in, and then your worms will be good to go. But I've never had, worms have tried to get out a few, but if they do, they just fall on the ground and they're worm jerky, you know what I mean? It's like, so they stay in there.
There's no mess, they just
No.
dry up,
Yeah.
and you can pick them up if they do escape. That was always a concern for my wife, but luckily the way they die was beneficial to keeping them in the house. Something else, you see the size of this? If you had one of these containers, even this size, you can raise worms. So if you're a single person and you don't have a lot of scraps, you can still grow in this size.
Yes, so anyone can compost, anyone can worm farm. Some people have them in their kitchen underneath the sink. There's people like mine are both inside and outside. James are inside, but some people said they left them under the bed. Didn't tell the visitor today when they were leaving, I had worms under your bed. So you never know it's a worm farm. It could be look like that table, and it could be a worm farm. But I would encourage everyone to become a worm farm because we'll make a difference for the world.
They're great. They're great pets too.
Yeah.
I started out they were going to be also fishing worms, but my daughter and wife do not allow these worms to get killed anymore. My daughter plays with them. She gets her hands dirty with them. She names all of them. And they're all named Cherry, Larry, Mary.
2,000.
She stops after a while, but it's a great family project too.
Exactly. We talk about the common pests. We talk about mites. A common thing is fruit flies. And the reason you get fruit flies in your worm farm is because when you buy bananas, there's fruit fly eggs already on there. So always encourage you to rinse off your food scraps, your banana peels, freeze them because that will help to eliminate the fruit flies. And then what you want to do is lift up your newspaper and stuff and bury it deep into underneath the paper and cover it up to prevent fruit flies. And some people use cover sheets, a wet piece of damp newspaper on top and cover it up. So, and freeze and thaw your fruit scraps because that'll help eliminate fruit flies in your bins.
Who's gone to Hy-Vee into their produce section and picked up something and there's just flies everywhere? Well, that's where they come from.
Mm-hmm. So it's not your bin. Your bin's not the problem. It's what we bring into your house. And like we discussed, leaves. I never use leaves in my worm bin because that's the great thing about YouTube. I can see your mistakes and not do it to mine. And so I don't bring leaves in. And like I said, if you want to use worms for fishing, strictly use more of they call it worm chow, which is oatmeal and stuff. But just get your bin just basically started. And then the more experience you get, then try new bins. Once your bin populates, then you can experiment. Once you put your worms into another bin, then you can say, okay, I want to try meat in this bin, so.
You don't stop saying that.
No, I'm saying, but.
Don't try meat.
No, I'm saying, but it's been proven that you can, but don't do it. Like I said, I don't do it. I've been raising worms for over 4 years and I don't.
We're talking about experienced
it's
people
yeah.
with specialized bins.
Yeah, they have
Do
like
not do meat.
big bins, so yeah, like I said, in the future, go that route if you want to try it, but right now, keep it simple. Don't overfeed them. Always underfeed your worms.
Best way to get rid of fruit flies, and I've done every single method possible, is just a glass uncovered with hopefully like a apple cider vinegar or red wine vinegar with a dash of Dawn soap. they go down, and as soon as they touch the surface, they can't get off. So you don't have to put special funnels and all this stuff, and sending it right in the middle of the worm bin. As soon as they hatch, they'll crawl up in there, and that's all she wrote. So.
And also, if times are tough, you can always use a kitty litter pail. You know, it's always recycle your kitty litter pails because you can use it for your plants as a garden potting plant. There's always ways, but there's been people that have actually just used a 5-gallon pail and just like cut a hole off on the top of the worm bin and use that as a worm bin. And I have a lot of holes in my totes on the lid for air. I've never had worms ever try to get out of the top. So they'll come out from the side. There's like little grooves here that they'll mate in, but you'll be just fine when it comes to worms.
This is a living ecosystem, so you will get, how did this creature get in there? Like, you'll get little tiny flies, you'll get mold, you'll get, and those are natural and beneficial to the system. The pests we're talking about are the ones that more or less bother us. The worms can live with all those.
Springtails and stuff. Springtails is another one, but they're more outside. Inside, I never had springtails. I never had mites in my worm bin. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to get your earwigs, centipedes, spiders, or things that'll come outside. But inside, it's been running well. I've never had the mites, which are.
I've had mites, but mites are easy to get rid of. The simplest thing is just to dry out your bin. So less moisture, the mites go away. The fruit flies is pretty much in my 10 years is my only issue I have with pests.
Exactly.
So.
Because I noticed when I came in, I looked at your cart, I looked at all that worm food over there, you know. But I ended it with keep it simple, don't overfeed them, always underfeed, and always like add more paper. And if you're gonna like add any food scraps, always bury your food scraps. So anything else you'd like to add?
Just like us, when you're eating at the dinner table, do you ever just put a whole steak in your mouth, or do you cut it up? Worms like food small. So from the paper to the food scraps, that's why blending does work well. If you want to put in the time, they will move through that faster. If you're wanting more compost and higher population, they will move through that food faster than if you just throw in big chunks of cardboard.
That's right.
And food scraps.
Do you sell your casting?
I don't sell it, like I said, for you, how much, if you tell me how much you would want, I could like sift and just give them to you, you know what I mean, because you're a friend.
So
You know.
anybody that's wanting to start, I'm willing to give you a handful of worms to start your own bin. That handful of worms will turn into a tote. So you don't need a fast start like
Yeah, like that.
buying the worms. But if you do want a fast start, that's the best route to go.
Yeah.
But if you're just wanting something to start, I'm open to give it a handful.
And the reason I go with the bulk rate is because when you have your 2,000 worms in there, whatever, per pound, you can start eating your food scraps now. So like say you get like 20 worms, it's gonna take a while for that to, get started, as in like eat 4 pounds of food, but it's a start. Either way, whatever your budget is, my goal, like says, I'm just a partner with people, and that's how I do worms. I let them take care of my castings and stuff like that. But if you're local, I can hook you up. But if someone everyone wants worms, I just say go to the website. I'll give you the links, and I make a commission off of it, and then I get back. I'm able to share my time, do giveaways and stuff, and so
Commercial worm.
do commercials, buy shirts, give stuff away.
Within Iowa that you can get?
So you can go to Baumgart's right now, and they have worm poop as fertilizer. It's actually, I think it's called black gold.
Yeah, it's called black gold, or vermicompost gold.
The bag is probably 20, the last time I looked, and so prices are different now,
Yeah.
but it's around $20 for a bag, about that big.
Yeah.
So worm compost, because of the nutrients that are in it, they tend to go for more per pound. Another thing I haven't really mentioned though, you don't want your worm compost to dry out because it's got all those living bacteria and stuff in there, which also helps your plant growth. So the longer your bag sits on the shelf, yes, it will still hold nutrients in it, but you're gonna have less than if you're taking it fresh from here. We didn't mention the worm tea, because we're pretty much finished. Did you wanna go through the worm tea?
No, I mean, yeah, go ahead. Like, the worm tea is not the, from what I've experienced, it's not the waste. It's like, you just getting a strainer, like say you have,
Cheesecloth?
yeah, you just do it that way. That's the way that, I mean, that's how that liquid stuff is on the bottom. But the worm tea is different. There's a system where you,
So I'll just run a simple
Yeah.
system. You get one of those big 10-gallon buckets, 5-gallon buckets, and you fill it with water. Hopefully well water. If it's city water, you just let it sit for a couple days so it removes the chlorine. And then you have something to hold the worm compost, like in a cheesecloth or a bag, and you put it in the water. And then you have an aerator that applies oxygen to that liquid. And so over the course of a couple of days, it basically creates this stew of living bacteria, and it's basically liquid fertilizer that it's supposed to be a really big boost to your plants. So that's something else that gardeners have done with their composting. So it stretches that little bit of compost that you have.
and I've heard they add some molasses in there. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there, so just because someone on YouTube says to do it, always check the source and verify things for yourself, but there's systems to do that. When it comes to your worm bin, a lot of us have water softeners, and the water is salty. Let it get chloride out for 24 hours, and then add that water in there.
You have a question?
You're fine.
Oh,
But what I would do, excuse me, do you have anything else you want to add?
unless anybody has any questions.
How big are those worms?
I'm gonna show you, let's draw names real quick. We got a couple of giveaways, and I'll let you look inside my worm bin. I made a video, like I said, I'm on YouTube, my channel is AJ's Green Topics. You can always check me out. It's not about me, but I educate people, and I'm growing daily. I'm starting to do more live streams. I just connected with a worm farm in Canada and a guy from Australia, so I'm always connecting with the community. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna draw a name, a number. Oh, I need someone, Tony? Give me a hug. Thank you. Ticket number 412111.
Sally, did you get it?
Oh, you got it? Okay. Congratulations. And I'm gonna keep these, because I'm gonna compost these, so don't throw them away.
Okay.
Keep your other ticket. Sally, you have a choice of the worm book or a t-shirt. And the t-shirt's from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. So you decide which one you'd like. And it's a large. Don't listen to him choose things, because he's gonna wear it.
I think I like the book.
Okay, sounds good, thank you for that.
And this book is an excellent book. It is very easy to read, lots of pictures. They have different ways to build different bins.
Thank you.
And it also has, the entire back is filled with resources where you can then do more research. So,
Thank
and
you,
it's,
sir.
Yeah, thank you.
and it's, I think, $5-6 off of Amazon, so it's a very affordable book. I highly recommend it.
And then the last number is 412107.
You said nine.
It was probably that one, but I think she's gone. Yeah, she's not here. So.
I wanna tell you that, she lost.
Yeah.
She lost.
Must be present to win. Because you guys are awesome. Thank you once again. That's why you never leave early. And the final number is 412115. No one's got that. What was that one over there? That's fine.
Another one.
Yeah.
What an odd.
I'm getting tired.
I'm sorry. It's supposed to be 2 and
I'll
done.
just wait here.
Okay, 2110. Okay.
Got them both.
One family got them all. Ring.
I'm sorry, you didn't have to.
Thank you. What we'll do now is, if you want to look at my worm form, I'll show you. Thank you, the Y, for allowing us to do
Oh,
this.
thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Tony also has, before you get started, AJ, can we just add a little bit of something from Tony? He's going to just really quick share a little bit about the community guard.
Okay, sweet. You
You
mind if
had
I record
mentioned
you?
it, yeah.
Okay.
If you want to.
Okay.
It won't be as interesting as worms.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
So, first off, I wanted to talk a little bit about why it's important to have community gardens. Has anybody got any thoughts on, other than, hey, it's a place to get free food, any thoughts on why it's important for communities to have a social place for people to come together to garden? Any thoughts?
Learn from each other.
Definitely learn from each other, that's a big one. What's that? Get rid of extra produce. There's a lot of research that's been done over the years on community gardens, and really important factors are crime reduction. You never think of that, but they have novels of research that show that when they bring community gardens into kind of high crime rate areas, that crime rate drops significantly. Forest City, fortunately, isn't one of those places. We're a pretty calm community, but that's a big part of it. Education. A lot of you probably grew up gardening, but that's not something people do as much anymore. You know, we've got a lot of kids that come to the Y that have never seen a garden. And they probably have no idea what comes out of a garden. They think food comes from a grocery store. They have no idea of the process before that food gets to the grocery store. And stagnancy in what people eat is a really big issue. You know, we all have our favorite foods, and you could probably find about 10 things that you typically eat very often. And kids are very much that way. So introducing new foods to them is something that's a big deal with community gardens, because we can grow things that maybe they don't have access to at a grocery store, or if you went to a grocery store, just is really expensive, okay? The other part of this is making food accessible for those who financially can't afford it. I've got 2 young boys and a wife that is an ultra marathon runner. We eat a lot of food, and we tend to eat healthy. And fortunately, we both are full-time employed, because if you look at what we spend a week in groceries, it's ridiculous, right? And you know, not all families are as fortunate as us, and access to healthy foods is difficult for a lot of them. They just can't afford it. So especially in places that are a little bit more impoverished, or where that, you know, economically challenged population tends to be larger than normal, it's a great way to provide food to people who can't typically afford it, okay? And we all know that, you know, we look at kids in schools, proper nutrition goes a long way, right? The behavioral issues, engagement, there's a lot of things that kids who don't eat healthy or have access to good foods they struggle with. So community gardens bring a lot to a community, and I think it's important. To his point, you know, the social aspect of it. I've got a mom who would literally sit in her house all day and watch Murder, She Wrote and those kinds of movies and TV shows, which is fine. But if she had access to a community garden, I have no doubt she would get out, she would do more, she'd be more engaged with other people. And as we grow older, a lot of research shows how important that social component is to brain health, right? One of the big things with people with early onset of Alzheimer's and things like that, it's the social component. Getting people socially involved has a huge impact on brain health as we get older. So those are things that are surface things that you wouldn't really think about in the community garden. And that was a lot of reasons why I wanted a community garden here. The other piece of this is how it benefits the Y and our members, okay? To me, I'm all about connecting people, especially diverse groups of people. And in my mind, if we can get you guys to get excited about working with a group of people, let's say like little kids, how can we do that? You're probably not really interested in going and kicking a ball around with them. You're probably not overly interested in sitting in a room with screaming kids and trying to read to them. But a community garden, that's a place where it's an easy fit for you guys. These kids get excited about it. I mean, they love our garden, right? In my mind, that was a really good way for us to start to connect this wealth of knowledge and this wealth of experience with kids who maybe don't have access to that kind of stuff at home, right? Which we've done a lot in that garden. So for us, we do a lot of educational stuff with the kids. And we teach them about different seeds and when you plant things and why you plant things and how you plant things and how come you don't plant this plant beside this plant. And teach them a whole process of doing something with their hands that results in something that they get to go eat later. So these kids will go plant carrots and they'll go plant broccoli and they'll go out there every day and they'll water it and they'll pull the weeds and then they get to eat it. And to them, that is like a really cool experience. So connecting kids to other populations and getting their hands dirty, like he was talking about with the worms, is huge. One thing kids don't do much of anymore is get their hands dirty, get engaged in things that a lot of us grew up and had to do. It just doesn't happen, you know, like put a hammer in a kid's hand and they're like, what is this thing? They don't know how to do a lot of this stuff. And it's not gonna get better, that's gonna get worse, right? So eventually we're gonna have a huge issue because these kids don't know how to do these things. That's our future workforce. And they don't have a lot of these skills that are really, really important. So if we can introduce kids to stuff when they're young and kind of re-engage some of that excitement about a lot of these things, whether it's gardening, a lot of these other things, it's gonna serve them for years. And unfortunately, not all parents have the skills, the time, or the desire to work with their kids to do some of this stuff. So it's important that we do it, right? Another big part of community gardening is stress reduction, right? Who here has zero stress in their life? Yeah, and you know, yeah. Stress is one of those things that it's changed a lot, right? It used to be stressful, you know, when 200 years ago, you were getting chased by a mountain lion, that was stress, right? Now, to us these days, somebody didn't return a phone call, that's our stress, okay? It's changed, but the chemical response in our body, that cortisol that floods our system is the same. Believe it or not, a lot of those stressful moments that you're like, well, that's kind of ridiculous, it has the same chemical result in your body that back in the old days when you got chased by a mountain lion, the responses are the same, all right? And cortisol is something that stress response, it affects your mood, it affects your brain health, it affects a lot of different things, right? And there's a lot of research out that shows that one of the best ways to reduce cortisol in your system and reduce that stress level is gardening. Right? It gets you outside, it gets you in the sun, it gives you something stressless to think about. It's cathartic, right? You're working with your hands and you're result, and you're doing something good. We need more of that in our life, right? Where we do something good and it helps a lot of people. There's a huge power in that. And one of the things we've learned with our kids is it provides them with tools to cope with things that they don't get any other way, okay? A lot of kids that act out and a lot of kids that are just really difficult don't have good tools to deal with issues that they have. And very often we shove them in a corner because they're disruptive, okay? What did that solve? At the end of the day, that really didn't help the kid. It helped the situation, but we fostered a growing problem. And things like getting that kid involved in gardening can actually give him tools or her tools to learn how to cope with some of these issues. And to me, anytime we can help kids become better people, it's really important. Cost-friendly access learning. I think I covered pretty much everything. Stress reduction, connecting diverse people. So that garden has been a very fun process. It was something I wanted to bring to the Y. The city came in and got on board with it. I wrote probably about $7,000 in grants to get that garden out there with the fencing. And that's all been volunteer driven. Like every fence post was volunteers, building all that fencing out there, the beds, it was all volunteer based. So the cool thing about it is if you want something out of it, you're driving by, go get it. That's why it's there, okay? If you see weeds and you're like, these weeds are pretty bad, go pull them. It's there for people. What I don't want to see is at the end of the year, we're throwing food away because people didn't feel like they had the right to go access that. Everybody has the right to access it, okay? Everybody has a right to be a part of that. So it's there, it's for you guys, enjoy it. If you ever have interest in grabbing some kids and taking them out there and teaching them, it's a wonderful experience. It feels good and it results in something awesome for the kids. I encourage them.
Say, they probably don't know you got a composter out there, can they use it?
Absolutely. Just don't throw any meat in it.
And it turns. You put some compost in it, it turns, guys.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yes.
Who would I contact if I'm interested in helping?
Betsy Marmaris. We all know Betsy, right? She loves gardening. Like that is probably her biggest passion. So she kind of has taken lead on that. And if you have any questions, want to get involved, she would be your person to talk to. I am all about building stuff. I have no success in the actual plants part of it. So I pass that on to her because she's really good at it.
Organic, and planted?
It's all organic. We don't put any chemicals on it at all. Yep. So
Can't plant grocery store like that.
it's hard to. Yeah, if you go buy an organic apple, you gotta take a loan out. So yeah, everything in there is organic. And Betsy, for the most part, kind of decides what goes in there. What I would like to see eventually is we kind of have a group that would get together each year and discuss what's going to go in the garden. But Betsy's done a really good job of just kind of taking the lead on that. She puts some really interesting things in it. Stuff that I probably wouldn't go buy at a grocery store, but I'm like, hey, it's here, I'll try it. It didn't cost me anything other than some time. So she puts some fun things in there and some normal stuff, your broccolis and carrots and tomatoes. But yeah. Any other
Sorry.
questions?
I take a walk, like, well, I don't take walks once, but on Sunday afternoon, I'm going down through there, going, man, that looks good. I have a garden at home. I feel like I'm stealing if I think so.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel that way. Last year we threw food away. We had stuff go bad in there. One thing Betsy is, she is really good at making these plants produce more than what I think they should. So we have excess. And one of the things that my goal is to actually get a group of kids together to go out and sell some of this stuff at the community, at the farmer's market. Because we're teaching them then enterprise as well, the business side of things. And that gets them to interact with people maybe they wouldn't other ways. So we're teaching them other skills. So I think this year, if I can connect with a group of kids who really like that, we will start taking stuff up there. But I would prefer it to just be here for people to take. But if we have excess, we'll probably do that.
like, could you have a sign out there saying this is a community?
We just
garden?
got our sign. It's actually sitting in Betsy's office waiting to be put up.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
said I knew it good, you know.
Yep.
You walk by, you don't see this community garden.
Yep.
Is there one spot just designated though for, Y runners, Ava's kids?
Yeah, I think Ava will take a bed. That's usually what we do is we kind of have a bed for the kids. That way, you know, the stuff they grow doesn't just disappear because that's devastating. And it's marked out there. It'll say, you know, childcare, YMCA only, but it's a small piece of the whole thing. There's plenty of other stuff in there.
There's a way to donate to plants or anything?
Probably, you know, that would be a good question for Betsy. I don't know how much that has been donated in the past and how much we've purchased.
Okay.
I know the school literally has thousands and thousands of packages of seeds that have been donated. I think we've gotten some things from them, but I think
They
there's.
still have a greenhouse?
They do have a greenhouse.
Okay.
And that's another thing we're working on is actually getting these kids into the school and going into the elementary school and having these kids plant stuff at the elementary school. And then we would kind of put it in the greenhouse till it's time to plant it and then bring it out. So we're connecting with more kids. It's another one of our future projects. They just had some turnover in the ag teacher at the high school, so we thought we had that in place. And then we had a new ag teacher, we thought we had it in place again, and now we got a new ag teacher. So that would be something, but yeah, you know, if that's something you'd be interested in, by all means, talk to Betsy and see what she needs, because she kind of is the one that deals with all that.
You know how to make a garden grow?
Yeah.
We need ya.
Yeah, well, the cool thing about it is, like, we've planted 3 gardens and they've all failed because we don't give them the TLC they need. And we have dogs, and the dogs like to run through it, and it's just, if we're gonna have a garden, it's gonna fail. And I think a lot of people are that way. It takes time,
Yeah.
it takes space, it takes effort, and those are things that we don't have a lot of. So we like to access something like this. We can be a part of it, we can help, but the commitment is a lot less than doing something on your own, right?
AJ, it's just like worms, trial and error.
Yeah, that's how it is. Everything, if you don't try, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Garden's the same way.
I like the
Exactly.
harvest diet, not good at anything else.
yeah, that's all right though. That's what we need each other for.
Yeah, I can honestly say in all of my years as a parent, my oldest son Hayden is the only one who's had a vegetable plant actually succeed. He grew a tomato plant, and it was something he got for Christmas when he was a little kid, and he treated it like a dog. I mean, he went out,
Yeah.
he hung out with it all the time, he watered it.
That's good.
And we were so excited because it had a tomato on it. And I got up early and I was making coffee and I looked out and this deer walks up, eats his tomato. So I was like, oh my God. So I got a tomato out of our fridge and I went out there and I laid it on the ground. I was like, dude, you got a tomato. You never knew.
Now he does.
Well, I've told him now. He rolled up and changed it. No, that was our one successful plant.
That was awesome. This is what they look like. In a perfect world, I used to not wear gloves, but now I do because you don't want that stuff underneath your nose.
I don't wear gloves, but it does dry out your hands.
But yeah, like I do a lot of recording. It's like, okay, I gotta have my hands clean to stop the video and start.
So you just can't pull a worm out of the ground and start your own bucket.
Yeah,
No, those are earthworms.
Yeah, but like, if you smell it, what does it smell like to you? You don't have to put your nose in.
I don't know, when you talk about that tea that just,
Yeah,
they,
but this
I think I
was
can smell
this
it.
was all.
You got 2,000 words in there?
No, this doesn't have 2,000. This is more like the stragglers that I
you just think you're gonna get a what's on
Yeah, it's right here. Yeah, this is a European nightcrawler.
Oh, those
This
are,
one's a lot
yeah, I
smaller.
can see where you could have 1,000 of those.
Because
Which one's a Nightcrawler? That one?
that one is, but yeah, you give them that worm chow.
It's on the red, it's part of the red wiggler.
That's a red banana.
So, do
Well,
you see a baby?
that one, it's a European red
We're
wiggler.
looking for I'm trying to find one. I just did a video and it says what your cocoons look like on my channel. It shows you
They're
exactly.
about the size of a grain of rice.
So they're getting lettuce right now.
There's a little guy there.
So, I don't see any cocoons right now. Yeah, this is. Yeah, but worms, like you give that like oatmeal, they'll get fat. So,
Or you find that in your book.
You said that was a European nightcrawler?
Yeah.
Is there an African one? too?
No, I don't have African, it's
You
too
don't have
cold,
African?
this climate's way too cold. What I'm
So
gonna
how do
do,
they climb out then?
they call it the side.
They do, they can climb up this side?
Yeah,
But they won't leave it if it's,
yeah, this is where they go in and make, they never go to the, but,
So you did have a lid on it, it won't go out?
they shouldn't, as long as you have light on, it won't come
Oh,
out.
like.
Yeah, you gotta have light.
Do you have one on there?
No, I just can't.
you don't have to have like, if your environment is good, they'll stay in.
Yeah, I have another bin with more worms and it's a longer one.
So could you do this as a business?
Yeah, I can make money right now. I've sold before, but if a lot of people want it, it's supply and demand, it's too hard.
Well, I saw it on PBS years ago, and the big commercial guys, they went to stores and got cardboard.
Yep,
And then they laid the cardboard down, wet it, and the worms would just keep going up, and then they harvest the castings in the bottom. I was like, really, just cardboard?
yeah.
But you know, if like IBM could donate to their throwaway,
There's a
I'm
lot-
sure they throw a lot
Yeah.
of food away.
There's a lot of people that don't, we just gotta touch base with the community.
Before they sold, I talked to the courts and they were going to, donate, as long as I signed something that I wasn't gonna eat it.
Yeah.
They said I could take as much as I wanted, but that was,
Do they
that
have
was.
special bins out back, or do they?
Is that a rock?
Did they do,
No, that's an eggshell, egg carton
just
shell.
trash bins?
Oh, okay.
Would they save it for
Yeah.
you, or
No, I would just have to go up there,
a certain time of the day?
That's
yeah.
Taking it out?
like, when I was in Houston,
They're not moving fast
I would go up
because
to
they're on
Starbucks
So-
and ask for the coffee grounds and they,
I've been taking these for years.
give them.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that
they
we
give
throw
you-
away some.
I grab a banana peel out of the trash, and somebody calls me a trash dumpster diver. I'm a dumpster diver.
Yes, sir.
Well,
And-
yeah, okay,
and
but
Jody,
cans too, I recycle.
when it comes to worms, like, the big worm farmers, I can absolutely have like 5 million worms, you know, we have supply and demand, I don't have enough, like I said, I might have like.
So most places.
Five-
Well, he said like $100, so like
So what
every
they do in
3
Houston,
months.
you didn't
if you-
sign something to
If you
them?
like
No,
raised
they
it for
just
a
need to,
few
because,
months,
you know, they don't have
then
to
you
pay,
kept.
if you're taking it, they don't have to pay.
Yeah.
And same thing with the grocery stores,
Yeah,
they,
but
But
then
you
you
would
could make
just-
money.
Like every month you could make a,
Oh,
I
here's
don't
what
know
they
if it's
do.
worth it for 100. but-
Yeah, you can make money, like,
Yeah, I
you sell what
see
you
that.
want, but yeah, that's a picture of my worm.
there,
Oh my
anybody wants to
goodness.
see an egg.
That's an egg.
Oh my.
I want to thank all the viewers for watching. If you like what you're hearing from me, subscribe to my channel. Give this video a like. Thank you for taking time out to watch, and you have a great day.
The size of the grain